figured do another chapter today. I am at my mother's sitting outside, so I figured it'd be nice. It's beautiful out, and I don't have my tripod, so hopefully I can do this. Okay, so we're going to be reading chapter 4, The Practice of Mindfulness. Imagine trying to learn something new without being given any instructions when learning what to do or how to do it. For most of us, many things would be nearly impossible to do. When learning to drive a car, play tennis, or knit, it's much easier to have someone coach you through the necessary steps of what to do and how to do it. Mindfulness is the core skill of DBT, and the next 2 chapters teach you how to practice this skill. Part 3 will help you learn, step by step, how to use your mindfulness skills to address specific symptoms of BPD. Perhaps you, like many people suffering from BPD, are skeptical of the idea that mindfulness can help. We asked a 23-year-old mother of 2 young children who has struggled with BPD for as long as she can remember what her initial thoughts were when we suggested that she practice mindfulness. And this was her response. I thought, how can something so seemingly simple bring relief to such unrelenting misery and suffering? What the hell is mindfulness? This doctor is on crack. Next doctor, please. When you think of mindfulness, you think of meditation and Zen and Buddhist principles, and kind of immediately dismiss it as being weird and reserved for dorks or monks. Especially when you're at the lowest point of your life, which you have to admit is where a lot of people are when they come to therapy. It's almost impossible to believe that this weird idea is a necessary part of recovery. It makes sense to have these types of reservations about the idea of practicing mindfulness. How can something like paying attention to your breath relieve suffering? Much of the confusion and misunderstanding come from simply not knowing what the practice of mindfulness is or how to do it. Knowing what to do makes it easier, but simply knowing what to do without practicing is nearly useless. Knowing that you have to hold the steering wheel and step on the accelerator doesn't mean that you know how to drive a car. You have to practice, and practice takes time. One way to think about it is as exercising the mindfulness muscle in your brain. Many people with BPD find themselves using short-term solutions, cutting themselves, driving recklessly, and engaging in disordered eating and other potentially destructive behaviors to solve long-term problems. These solutions can provide quick, though temporary, relief from suffering, but generally cause more problems and ultimately a return to suffering. The practice of mindfulness provides a long-term solution to suffering, but the journey takes time and patience. Setting up your mindfulness practice. You may be wondering how long and how often you should practice mindfulness. For the purpose of this book, and for people who are just starting out, we recommend practicing a minimum of 20 minutes each day, which can be divided into 2 10-minute sessions. Once you have been practicing for a while, try to increase the duration of your practice gradually, working up to 30 minutes or more each day. Keep in mind that we will be teaching you ways to use mindfulness throughout your day, but carving out time for a formal meditation practice is key to learning this skill and integrating it into your life. No matter how skilled at mindfulness you become, you must remain committed to practicing for a prescribed period each day. When is a good time to practice? This is a matter of preference. Some people like to begin the day with mindfulness practice, while others prefer practicing it in the afternoon or before going to bed. The most important thing is to make a commitment and stick to it. If you know that you are someone who puts things off or returns home in the evening quite tired, you will likely be more successful with practicing first thing in the morning. The goal is to develop a habit of practicing mindfulness, so committing to a specific time will help you do this. You may find it useful to set an alarm on your cell phone or computer, or leave yourself a note. Some people find it important to practice in the same location every day. We will be teaching you a number of different types of practice with the goal of enabling you to practice anywhere. Think about what was helpful for you in the past when you created a new routine in your life. People who are starting mindfulness practice also wonder how or if they're supposed to sit. We will teach you many different types of practices, some in which you will be seated and others in which you will move around. Sitting in a formal lotus position is definitely not required. For sitting practices, find a seated position in which your chest remains open without crossing your arms, and your sit bones make even contact with the surface you're sitting on. Specifically, sit up straight in a chair, using pillows behind your back if needed, with both of your feet firmly on the floor and without crossing your legs or ankles. Or sit cross-legged on the floor. Draw your shoulders back and rest your arms gently on your lap. Palms up if that's comfortable. Don't cross your arms or hunch over. Part of the practice is to pay attention to how you are sitting. Finally, you will do most of the mindfulness practice with your eyes open. We live most of our lives with open eyes, so your practice should be as you live. Taking control of your mind. The practice of mindfulness allows you to take control of your mind. You may feel tossed around or consumed by your feelings, and imagine that there's nothing you can do about it. In DBT, this is sometimes referred to as an emotion mind, where our emotions dictate our actions. Like others with BPD, you may find that you are dragged around by powerful feelings and that sometimes the consequences can be grim. What's worse is that when you look back on these times, you can't always figure out how you got there. When you don't pay attention, your feelings can make you change your mind and not stick to your commitments. You might end important relationships and even do or say things that go against your own values. Lisa, a bright, articulate, and kind 20-year-old with BPD, with whom we have worked on mindfulness for the last 2.5 years, frequently found herself thrown about by her feelings and engaging in mood-dependent behaviors. That is, her goals, commitments, and relationships would change rapidly depending on her mood. This was an exhausting way to live. Lisa would find herself sending emails to her mother, brother, and boyfriend detailing her intense hatred of them. Sometimes this happened after arguments or feelings of disappointment, and other times the emails seemingly came out of nowhere. She complained that people said she was too much to handle. Her decisions and conclusions were driven by her emotions, and rational thinking appeared to go out the window. The problem was that within hours her emotions changed such that she was riddled with guilt and shame over her behavior and the intense fear that she had caused irreparable damage to a relationship. This type of suffering reinforced her feelings that she was a terrible person who caused others pain. Lisa felt that this was a horrible way to live, and we agreed. How did a relationship that was so important one moment suddenly become unnecessary and intolerable the next? Getting tossed around by your emotions can be incredibly painful and destructive. Most of us don't pay attention to the habitual nature of our thinking. We don't pay attention because we have not been taught how to do so, which was how it was for Lisa before she began learning mindfulness. An untrained mind can cause significant distress, even without your knowing it. You may find that your thinking falls into one of two extremes. On one end, you get so tangled up in your thoughts that you pay too much attention to specific thoughts or worries to the point where you cannot think about much else or see the bigger picture. At the other end, you pay very little attention at all to how you think. Perhaps you tend to feel as if things just happened and cannot figure out how events unfolded or what led up to your reaction. Each of these extremes can lead to problems. When you are unable to figure out how feelings, thoughts, and events unfold, you get stuck in suffering. Awareness, attention, and curiosity allow you to take control of your thinking and your responses so that you can break these patterns. Why should you pay attention and be curious? A lack of attention and curiosity keeps all of us living routine and habitual lives and can create distance from painful thoughts and feelings. This may seem like a good thing or may even be your goal at times, but it's not an effective long-term solution. Keeping your distance from your emotions may be driving your suffering. Paying attention to thinking means slowing down and looking in detail at your thoughts. The speed of your thoughts, are your thoughts racing or sluggish? Quality of your thoughts, are my thoughts organized or jumping around from one subject to another, like a monkey leaping from tree to tree? Tone of your thoughts, are my thoughts angry, judgmental, kind? And the actual content of your thoughts, what am I thinking about? Dinner, my partner, the fight with my boss? As a goal of this practice, people who develop mindfulness learn to take control of their thoughts and feelings. By paying attention, you can find more peace, joy, and serenity in the way you live. Learning how to do this can free you from the chaos and stress in your mind. For someone who has never practiced mindfulness, freedom from chaos can be pretty hard to imagine. Practicing mindfulness. Through mindfulness practice, you will learn how to attend to what's going on in your mind and body. And once you do that, you can learn different things to do with your thoughts and feelings that will decrease your suffering. In DBT, these activities are called the what and how skills. That is, what you do to be mindful and how you do it. Throughout this chapter, we will give you specific practices that will focus on each aspect of mindfulness. We would like for you to try each practice at least once and keep a journal to record your experience as your practice. You may find that you enjoy some practices more than others, but it's important to expose yourself to as many types of mindfulness practice as possible, because you never know what might be helpful if you don't try. Remember, it's not necessarily about liking the practice, but about challenging your mind and being curious. It's also important to remember that on some days, you may feel more successful than on other days. We are always amazed at how we can practice one day and attend to it with little effort, while on other days, the same practice feels impossible. With mindfulness, your experience is always changing. Remember, your mind will wander often. When you notice that your mind has wandered, bring your attention back to the task of just being mindful. The act of returning your mind to the task is exercising your mindfulness muscle. Use intention. The practice of mindfulness in any moment begins with intention. Anything that you do mindlessly, you can do mindfully. But what makes the practice mindful is your intention to do it mindfully. Practice doesn't just happen. You get to choose. You can get in your car and drive to work on autopilot, thinking about your upcoming day, how desperate you are for another cup of coffee, or whether you will have time to go to the gym after work. Or instead, you can decide that your intention when you drive will be to just drive. You will notice your desire for coffee and refocus on driving. If you choose to practice your mindfulness skills, it is with the intention to practice. As you drive, notice your mind wandering, and if it does, bring it back to driving. It's amazing what you can notice when you turn such a habitual daily task into a mindfulness practice. It is mindfulness if you are aware that you are practicing. Some people who begin practicing mindfulness tell us that they have heard that the goal of mindfulness is to have their minds never wander. It's impossible for your mind not to wander. As we mentioned earlier, our brains produce thoughts. It's one of the things the brain is designed to do. The act of mindfulness is choosing, with intention, to return your mind to the task you set out to do. Each time your mind wanders and you intentionally bring it back, you are being mindful. Mindfulness is not simply about having a quiet mind. Decide to practice. When you decide to practice mindfulness, remind yourself that you are beginning a mindfulness practice. When you are new to mindfulness, it's important to explicitly tell yourself that you are about to do something mindfully. For example, I'm going to mindfully wash the dishes for the next 5 to 10 minutes. This provides a cue to your brain that you are embarking on a practice and choosing where to focus your mind. Do something different each day. Practice the skill of intention by setting an intention to change one of your habitual behaviors each day for 1 week. For example, for an entire day, intentionally cross your legs with your non-dominant leg on top. Brush your teeth with your non-dominant hand. Change the order in which you carry out your morning or bedtime routine. take a different route to work or school, or carry your purse or briefcase in your non-dominant hand. The idea is to practice intentionally doing something differently, committing to do so for a specific period, and then paying attention to what you observe. Watch and notice. The second mindfulness skill that you will learn is to simply watch and notice your thoughts and feelings. This is known as the observe skill in DBT. In the context of mindfulness, to watch means to just notice without putting labels on the experience. It is noting and attending to the experience with all of your senses. Because we typically label experiences, mastery of this skill can be challenging. All too often, we do things without really paying attention, so we miss critical information. Earlier, we mentioned that watching and noticing means paying attention. When you pay attention, you will begin to recognize the automatic responses that you have to most situations. And for people with BPD, it is often these automatic, habitual responses in relationship that cause so much misery. Once we had a client who got angry every time his mother spoke. He would get angry whether she said good morning to him or nagged him about cleaning up his room. He said that it was just her voice that made him angry. He'd become so annoyed with her that he automatically responded negatively, whether she was doing or saying something that bothered him, or doing or saying something kind. Paying attention to these automatic responses allowed him to take control of how he responded to her, and ultimately taught him that he had a choice in how he responded to any situation in his life. Learning to observe the early signs of emotions in your body can help you to not be so surprised or overwhelmed by an intense emotion that it feels as if it came out of nowhere. The act of simply watching or observing can quiet the mind. Don't underestimate how challenging it is to not use words. In our culture, we tend to put words to all of our experiences. Imagine sitting in your room and just observing the sounds in your house, just noticing the sounds without labeling what they are. Or imagine sitting outside, watching the sunset without getting caught up in the exact colors, just watching as they become less and less vibrant. Or imagine watching clouds in the sky as they move past and change shapes. The act of watching and noticing turns off the thinking part of your mind, which gets revved up in times of stress and anxiety. Watching and noticing can be an excellent way to calm your mind and body. You can think of it as letting your mind be in a state of being instead of a state of thinking and doing. Let your mind just be with what you notice. Once you get the hang of attending by watching and noticing things outside of you, you will increasingly be able to watch your own thoughts without getting caught up in the content or action urges that arise. Our minds get busier and our worries stronger when we get caught up in these thoughts. Just watching thoughts go by like cans on a conveyor belt can actually slow down the mind. This means that you need to let go of problem solving and understanding, and simply watch. It's as if you were standing on a platform in a train station and watching trains come in and out of the station, but never getting on. One day, Elizabeth, who had been in treatment for BPD with us and working on mindfulness for about a year, said, "I get what you've been talking about. You won't believe how many thoughts and feelings I had in 5 minutes when I was waiting for a friend, and I didn't even get out of the chair. If I had acted on my thoughts, I would have made my situation pretty bad and done what I always do when I find myself thinking this way. First, I noticed the excitement that we were having lunch together. Then I heard her talking to someone in front of the restaurant and felt devastated that she liked that girl's company better. Then I felt angry and empty. Finally, I concluded that I was not important and she didn't care about me. Otherwise, she would have come directly to the table. This quickly led me to think I'm not worth caring for and don't deserve love from others. I felt pretty bad. Then I had the intense urge to leave the restaurant and walk right by her without saying a word, because I was sure if she cared about me, she would run after me. I noticed this urge, but realized that these were all just thoughts and feelings for which I had little evidence. These thoughts continued for a bit, and within a few moments she came to the table, was happy to see me, and apologized she had gotten stuck talking to a family friend who happened to be at the restaurant. And again, my mood shifted. I realized that had I left, she would have been totally confused and not gone after me, and I would have felt miserable. Just as your stomach produces digestive enzymes, your brain produces thoughts. That's what brains do. And there's nothing wrong with thoughts. You don't judge your stomach for producing enzymes, but you probably often judge your thoughts. You can attend to thoughts without taking any action at all. You don't need to listen to all of your thoughts. Or, for that matter, believe them. With practice, watching your thoughts go by can slow them down. You may find great pleasure in being able to turn down the running commentary of a busy mind, or no longer needing to constantly react to your thoughts. What makes our minds so busy? There are times when having a busy mind can be distracting and unpleasant. Take rumination, for example. Rumination, in psychology, is the process of spending a lot of time thinking about a situation. For some, rumination can be difficult to control. You can spend hours and hours thinking about a situation over and over again, which can lead to obsession, depression, and fear. Some of our clients with BPD are perfectionists. So, for example, they might spend so much time thinking about how to perfect a term paper that they never even write down a single word. Another type of a busy mind is catastrophizing. You will recall from Chapter 1 that catastrophizing is a type of thinking that leads you to believe that something is far worse than it actually is, and that all of the possible outcomes will lead to disaster. So taking the example of the term paper, catastrophizing thoughts would go like this. I can't write the paper, so I'll fail the course and won't get a recommendation. I won't be accepted to college, so I can't go to graduate school. Therefore, I won't get a good job and will be a failure for the rest of my life. One young man began with the thought that he would do poorly at a job interview, and that thought led him to the conclusion that he would end up homeless and living under a bridge. We can laugh as we look back on it now, but the amount of stress and anxiety that this type of thinking causes cannot be overstated. One of the joys of mindfulness is that you can develop the capacity to get some distance from your thoughts, and maybe even laugh at where your mind goes. One benefit of mindfulness is learning to not take yourself so seriously. Using your senses. You can watch and notice with all of your senses. Note that everything you watch or attend to changes, whether it's pleasant or not, and you can watch that happen. The practice of using your senses is probably the easiest way to understand this. Get a scented flower and smell its fragrance. Put a sour candy in your mouth and hold it there for a while. Experience the taste and observe how it changes. Sit outside wearing short sleeves and notice the temperature on your skin. Sit on a park and, without turning your head or shifting your gaze, simply watch as people walk in and out of your line of sight. Don't follow them with your eyes. Just observe them coming in and out of view. Hold your attention, notice when you get distracted, and bring yourself back to these experiences. That's mindfulness. Do nothing but watch and attend. Many of us are tempted to do something rather than simply observe what's happening. How often do you not scratch an itch? The desire to do something comes very strongly, especially when your thoughts come with strong emotions. Thoughts and feelings are often followed by an urge to do something. In DBT, we focus quite a bit on action urges because an important function of emotion is to motivate or prompt actions and behaviors. The behavior is not part of the emotion, but the urge is. Sometimes we have urges that prompt behaviors that are not useful, that get in the way of our goals, or that have negative consequences. It's important to be able to identify the emotion and the urge and not always act on it. To develop this capacity, we are asking you to intentionally notice the urge and do nothing about it. We have urges all of the time. How often do you find yourself at a store becoming angry or impatient at the salesperson for being unable to help you? The urge may be to yell at the person or treat him badly. However, if you need to purchase an item and this is the only sales clerk who can help you, yelling can create a lot of suffering for you and result in the salesperson not helping. In an extreme case, you could end up being escorted out of the store, unable to purchase the item you came for. you came in for. Can you remember any times when not reacting to an urge would have been more effective, but you just couldn't figure out how to avoid reacting? This is where just watching and attending can help. Typical human reactions to thoughts and emotions tend to fall into one of two categories: suppression and enhancement. Suppression. If you have a thought or urge, one reaction would be to suppress that thought. This is like squashing down a thought by thinking things like, I shouldn't have done that. That's a bad thought to have. What an awful thought. The problem with this approach is that it often increases the intensity of the thought or urge, making it even more powerful. It would be like our telling you, don't think about a pink balloon, and don't think about a pink balloon right now. While you may have no interest in pink balloons at all, once we tell you not to think about pink balloons, suddenly pink balloons will be in your mind all the time. Are you still thinking about pink balloons? Enhancement. Enhancement is the opposite of suppression. When instead of pushing away a painful thought or urge, you end up magnifying it, which also leads to suffering. In this case, you can find yourself acting on urges that increase the intensity of your thoughts and feelings, and doing so without awareness. Pitfalls to reacting rather than watching and noticing. A common pitfall to reacting to your thoughts and emotions rather than noticing them is that you tend to collect evidence in the form of thoughts, memories, experiences, or cognitive distortions that validates how you are feeling in the present moment. Collecting evidence, one-sided as it may be, that you are loathsome or miserable will simply lead to more suffering. Lisa, who was introduced earlier, frequently found herself enhancing the exact emotions that she found the most distressing, and discovered that she had been doing so for years without any awareness. She was unable to just watch and notice these thoughts. Without acting on them. An avid journal writer in times of distress, Lisa would find herself spending hours rereading her journal to make sure I remember that I've messed up and ruined people's lives. She would spend hours reading and thinking about everything that would validate her current emotional state. This behavior resulted in missed college classes, missed outings with friends, inability to get out of bed, hopelessness, and thoughts of suicide. Her behavior was enticing because it validated her suffering, even though she didn't particularly like what she was doing. Mindfully paying attention allows you to be in control of your mind, rather than the other way around. This skill of watching and noticing will teach you about who you are and how your mind works. It is the key to knowing yourself and all of your thoughts and feelings. As you start to practice mindfulness, you will become more aware of not only unpleasant and painful emotions, but also wonderful and pleasant experiences that you previously missed. One man with BPD who had started a mindfulness practice came in for a few weeks, beaming, declaring that stupid wind. Declaring that this was the first time in 17 years that he had ever noticed the beauty of the Charles River, even though he had lived next to it all of his life. Just noticing the river brought him a joy that he had not previously experienced. Even those of us who practice mindfulness daily have opportunities to observe things that we previously missed. Gillian has been getting coffee at the hospital cafeteria every day for the last 3 years. Recently, she looked up and noticed a huge, colorful mural on the wall that she had never seen before. She noted, "When I think back on it, most days I rush into the cafeteria, thinking about all that I have to do during the day, and routinely, I can't talk right now. Routinely get my coffee without ever shifting my gaze to look at what's around me." When we get lost in our thoughts, we often miss what's right in front of us. People experience excitement as they begin to notice pleasant experiences, but wonder if it's worth it to experience the pain of paying attention to hurtful emotions and experiences. You might argue that awareness of the experience of suffering is exactly the reason why you don't want to practice mindfulness. If you are like many others, noticing painful emotions or painful emotional experiences will motivate you to stop noticing or to take action to change the experience. This is completely natural, yet the practice will lead you to see that all thoughts and feelings change, whether you like them or not, and usually when you pay attention to them, they can change more quickly if you would like them to.
Voila! Now we're in a different place. 2 months later. It's all in your head. An interesting fact of brain neurology is that emotions that are left alone, not suppressed or enhanced, last for a very short time, somewhere between 5 and 20 seconds. If you could train your mind to simply observe, 5 to 20 seconds would be all you would need to endure an unpleasant emotion. When you think about the painful situation over and over again, you could stretch those thoughts from 20 seconds to minutes, hours, days, and even months and years. Learning to let things go would allow you to suffer less. Buddhist meditators have known this for more than 2,000 years, and central to their belief is that the origin of suffering is attachment or holding on. For many of us, rather than letting thoughts and emotions pass, we hold on, react, and suffer. Learning to attend to your mind by watching and noticing is the first step in learning to let go. Let thoughts and feelings go by just watching them. If you simply watch and attend, you will notice that experiences, feelings, and thoughts arise in your mind and then slip out away, like clouds moving across the sky. The thoughts and feelings may return like clouds when the wind changes direction. Your goal is to let the thoughts and feelings go, rather than cling to them. When we cling to our thoughts and feelings, they stay with us. When thoughts stick in your mind, it's usually because they have powerful emotions attached to them. Imagine thinking of an orange. Usually the thought of an orange wouldn't stick around in your mind for a long time, but if when you were a child, other kids had thrown oranges at you during every recess, the thought of an orange might be a painful one that might stick in your head for a while. Many people have had painful experiences that stick in their minds, and this is because of the emotions associated with these experiences. It makes sense that memories can be very hard to let go of. Learning to let them go is a hard thing to do, and yet ultimately essential if suffering is to be reduced. It's also important to remember that you can always go back to your thoughts and memories. The goal is to be able to choose when you want to think about something and when you don't. Watching and noticing is a way to expose yourself to the emotions that you find difficult to bear so that you can get better at bearing them. Charlotte was terrified of using public transportation. Slowly, we exposed her to thoughts and images of buses and trains and got her to attend to her thoughts by watching them and noticing the fear that arose. We also had her sit with the fear without distracting herself from it or doing something to end it. Eventually, she was able to get on a bus, which allowed her to become more independent. In mindfulness practice, watching and attending means attending to exactly what it is. This means attending to everything that's happening in this very moment, leaving nothing out and adding nothing to it. Thoughts, feelings, and sensations will come and go. Everything changes. In every moment, notice what is, and you will also notice that things change. Watching and attending to an experience is different from the experience itself. You can liken this to watching a movie or going to a baseball game. Watching a movie is different from being in the movie. Watching a baseball game is different from playing in the game. You are not your thoughts. You are not your feelings. You are not your desires or emotions, and you can watch all of them come and go. So mindfulness practice. Taste. Place a raisin, a mint, or a piece of chocolate in your mouth and hold it there for 2 minutes. Notice the texture and taste during the experience. Bring your attention to this activity and watch how your experience changes over time. Notice the thoughts and feelings that come into your mind. When your mind wanders to other thoughts, return your attention to what you have in your mouth. You could also practice using smell. Take a flower or fragrant cream and notice its scent for 2 minutes. Move the item closer to and farther away from you. Does the scent change? Remember, when your mind wanders, notice this and bring your attention back to watching the item and smelling the scent. Pay attention to specific thoughts that arise in your mind throughout the experience. You can also practice using touch. There are a number of ways to practice mindfulness using touch. Place your hands together, lining up your fingers and palms so that they are pressing together. Now, slide your hands back and forth against one another for 20 seconds. Notice the sensation and the temperature as you rub. Stop rubbing your hands together, and for 30 seconds more, notice the sensation in your hands. A second practice is to spend 2 minutes noticing an itch without scratching it. Pay attention to the changing sensations in each of these practices. Do each of these practices for 2 to 3 minutes. Mindfulness practice, sound. Sit outside in a park or in your front yard or backyard for 20 minutes. See if you can pick up the sounds of nature around you. Just notice them as sounds without spending time trying to figure out what they are. Is the sound loud or soft, high or low pitched? Mindfulness practice, sight. Spend 2 to 3 minutes examining your hands as if you've never seen them before. The idea with this practice is to examine and attend to your hands and all that you see. Look at the front and back of your hand. Notice your fingers and the lines and the shades of your skin. Our hands are so integral to our day-to-day lives, and we pay very little attention to them. The saying goes, I know it like the back of my hand. But how many of us actually know the back of our hands?